So today I will be talking about learning spaces, which is a nice coincidence as that will be the topic of the full conference, of course. And I will limit this a little bit. Voilà. And with these learning spaces, I think we all know that there are many more learning spaces that are popping up. And with these learning spaces, we understand, most of the time, we understand it as alternatives to classrooms. And we have big spaces, lecture halls and group discussions and all types of learning spaces that keep on evolving because a learning space has been there for thousands of years. But so why do we feel that it is so important that we focus on it today? I think it is because the context of our learning is changing significantly. And because of that, and that comes due to an emergency, let's say a learning emergency that we can all feel is coming. Now, it's not only a gut feeling as a teacher that we have or as a student, but we can also hear it from the World Economic Forum, for instance, where they say 1 billion people of the world population, which is almost a third of the working population, needs to be reskilled in some way within the next 10 years, which is kind of a massive amount of learning that needs to be happening. And if we think about the master students that we teach, or the bachelor students or PhD students, you understand that you can not just wait until they finished university and took a job and something like that. We need to make it happen for everybody throughout society. Just quite a challenge, I feel. And that is why learning spaces become so interesting. Now, of course, I said, look, learning spaces to me are always shaken, because they're constantly changing as the world around us evolves, but it's never really stirred. You can't say that it is a massive transformation, or that there's a paradigm shift, or at least I'm not one who sees it as such. There's always a link to the past. And that's, I think, what makes it interesting. Of course, if we are talking about reskilling, and there's a tractor just passing by, if we think about reskilling, there are a couple of universal skills, and we all know about this. It's critical thinking, and I think if we're here, we're critical thinkers. It's about creativity, and I hope that everybody can enjoy that. But of course, also about collaboration and about communication. Now, in this case, communication is key, even if it is in lecturing, but also if it is in philosophical discussions or sharing of ideas, as was mentioned in the coffee break. And there is another big shift. So not only the universal skills that are slightly different than before, but now with this learning, with this reskilling that needs to be happening throughout society, it will affect all of us. And that is where it becomes a little bit more exciting as well, because it's no longer just students between 18 to 22. No, it's about every age that can add something to society. And according to my feeling, that is everybody who can still do anything. All of us will need to be able to reskill or to be keeping on learning in these learning spaces. So I will highlight 3 learning spaces. And if I say something that triggers an idea or triggers a comment, please do add it to the Padlet or in the chat here. And the main thing is, if I talk about learning spaces, I will give a couple of examples. Of course, that's not an exhaustive list, but I will end each big learning space section with a couple of action points to optimize them, or at least what I feel would optimize those particular learning spaces. First of all, you have these classic learning spaces. Those we know, it's easy. It started years and years and years ago, and the first one in recorded writing history was like the Socratic Debate. With the Socratic Debate, you immediately have like an informal discussion going on. Now, Socrates was a pain in the ass, because what did he do? He was walking around Greece and Athens, and each time he encountered someone, right at the moment that he had an idea, he questioned that person. What are you doing here? What do you think about coffee breaks? Is it really necessary? And then the other one was forced to immediately, in this public space, start with a discussion or communicate very clearly, I don't want to discuss with you, Socrates, because I need to go home to do the dishes, something like that. Now, that's an old form of critical thinking, of communication, and of some sort of combined learning technique. We replicate this in current contemporary learning spaces as well. Within university, for example, you have the Oxford debates going on, you have group discussions. You can also have fishbowl discussions where people take the floor, one after the other, argumenting on a specific subject. So that's something we can really do. It's classic, and we have our contemporary version of this. Beautiful. Another one, really known, lecturing. Now with the lecture halls, of course, most of the time those are big, huge aulas, and you have someone in front who is the expert and they explain something. Now in the coffee break, there was someone mentioning the fact that if you need to be, or you need to get inspired in a way by the one who's doing the talking. Now that's really difficult because you can be inspired by many things. But if the one at the end or at the beginning, depending on your viewpoint, who is in the middle of the lecture room is talking, and he does not or she does not engage with the audience, then you could as well be looking at a recording or a documentary or a YouTube movie, anything, because then you don't feel the urge to add something. If you think about what it takes for 21st century skills, it is about communicating, it is about collaboration and engagement. So a good lecture is wonderful, but of course it needs to be ignited. Needs to be just a little bit more motivating for people to really go in deeply and pick up topics a little bit more difficult than purely delivering them a handbook for learning. A classic lecture room is, of course, something where you are physically present as a student and as a teacher, but now, specifically with the pandemic, but also with the way the global student population is moving, there are a couple of new options in lecturing style. And one of them is the Zoom room. Now at KTH, you have the Zoom room, which is at the Sten Wielander classroom, let's say. And there you have, Zoom room is mostly used as a type of lecturing or discussion room, but it has multiple microphones, multiple cameras, and each learner, and I explicitly call them learners, works within this communicative tool with their own laptop. So you can engage much more willingly if you want to engage. And you can see the expressions on the face of the learners because they are not just in small boxes, but there are life-size heads because they use big screens. Those Zoom rooms can also pull in co-hosts or host teachers. As you can see in the last picture, there is someone teaching. Actually, it's a class between KTH and ESADA, as was mentioned in the beginning, and there is a professor who couldn't welcome physical students in the Zoom room, but who insisted that he would teach from the Zoom room because then he could use a whiteboard with collaborative annotations on it. So The lecture, a classical mode of teaching and learning, has its contemporary options. Another one is coaching one-on-one or mentoring that has been there through the ages, and we still have it as a guide on the side teacher who supports the learning one-on-one with if a student is working on a specific project. And of course, apart from these couple of examples, you have this beautiful way of opening up the learning space, the campus, the silo of research and teaching to a much more vivid, organic learning environment. And you have open spaces at universities, you have huddles where people can collaborate in small groups, you have quiet rooms for deeper reflection, or you have simply open forums where people can come and informal get together and talk about something, discuss something. All of these are really nice examples of, let's say, classical learning, but happening in a more contemporary environment. But how can we optimize this? I feel that there is a definite need to upgrade teachers again. Especially if we look at universities, the main revenue comes from the students. So the students come in and want to learn. And that is our main revenue as a university. Yet our quality is not measured in terms of quality teaching. It's about how many papers are published in journals, which is at the very other end of the spectrum. Not a seemingly straight connection between revenue generated for the university and then the quality of a university. So I think it is time to really upgrade teaching again and say, look, we are awarding teachers who are willing to embrace all of these critical universal skills, the contemporary skills in the 21st century, and who are really using them within their classroom to engage with the students, for instance. Daniel mentioned in one of the earlier sessions that there is this co-pilot thing where you appoint a student to be part of your teaching. You can even go a little bit further as a teacher, because as a teacher, you know your own expertise, of course, but there are lots of educational technologies you might not really understand fully, but you can ask a student, because students have different experiences from the moment they were young and entering schools. So we can use them, and we should use them much more often. And of course, if we want to open up this learning space at our university, we need to allow people to come in and attend courses, not only master courses or full bachelor courses, but small portions of courses, because all of us will be needing additional learning. So I think these are some of the actions we can take as universities or classical learning and teaching providers in order to get more of an engagement or connection with our students. Now, another learning environment that is being shaken up is the professional learning space that we are encountering. I referred to the Zoom rooms where we can already use someone, an expert from outside, for instance, from a corporation, to give a lecture or part of a lecture to our students, physically and remotely present, because we live in this global world. And that is an easy thing to do. It doesn't require any additional investment. And it has an additional benefit, because these people have, of course, expertise that we don't necessarily have in the university. Another option is, of course, building the virtual laboratories or using 3060 camera projects in order to get the student a better, or give them a better understanding of what is really happening on the work floor. And one of these options, if you think about virtual labs, of course you have virtual labs already, or simulations, where you as a learner can go and visit a specific laboratory, be it in the field somewhere in the world, or maybe even in a company nearby, but which has restrictions in terms of security. And then by developing this virtual lab, learners can explore these working environments or research environments and better understand what needs to be done or what can be improved. So the nice thing is that these types of learning, who coincide with the professional learning world, can come together much easily now due to this technology that we have. If we look at the 360 degrees camera, it doesn't take a lot of money, but we can just record a movie and show how a real spaceship looks like, and what are the different features of it and how we can manipulate them. And maybe it can enhance the idea of being, of what we can create in order to fit within these space capsules. So you can already see that this corporate learning trickles into the university. But there's, of course, also the university settings that can augment a professional world as well. So there is a whole lot of movement, not only with the physical students, the remote students, the student master, student learner, and the professional learner going on. There's also this movement of how to use specific information in order to take action. And one of those is, of course, augmented reality. Again, this is something that has been here for more than 10 years. It's not that special, but now we are at this moment in time where the learning spaces can really apply this with bigger rates of success. And then the last one I want to show is the makerspace. I know that in Stockholm you have at least one makerspace, I think more. And these makerspaces are again linked to being creative and being able to attract or to inspire students or professional learners who want to come and to accomplish something that hasn't been accomplished before, or at least to try it out. But if we want to optimize this professional learning space and combine it with what we have at the university as a learning space, then we again need to take some actions. We need to increase the synergy between businesses and the university. We have them now already, and we know that Europe is pushing us, of course, in that direction. But I feel that we can do more, and we need to do more if we want to address this learning emergency that we are facing. We can invite industry experts as teachers, easy enough. And we can also welcome professional learners if they want to learn something, or if they want to change their career. We can say, look, we have this AI specifically for health systems. Come to the course. You only need to pay a little bit, or it is free. That's an ideal world. Come, take the course, and you will be better prepared, or you will be able to take this information, this knowledge, back to your own corporate world. So there is this synergy between university learning spaces and professional learning spaces. But then there's, of course, this one big additional learning space. And I think this one affects us all, and we know them all, yet this is the most diverse learning space. And the difficulty is that we don't always understand how people are learning in their own personal learning spaces. If you look at what we all had to face while the pandemic was, well, it's still happening, of course, but with the pressure of the pandemic upon the learning system, then you know that we all needed to really understand more about technology, specifically educational technology in this case, and the digital skills. And we needed to do this in many occasions from our own home. This means that our home needed to be equipped with internet. It needed to have all the equipment in order to follow courses, in order to keep connected or to keep on communicating. It needed us to enhance the skills that we have, because they're talking about emergency learning, but it was also about emergency comfort and being able to stay in touch in communication with each other. So all of our digital skills needed to be pushed to its limits. And at the same time, we needed to make sure that we had all this technology. And in many cases, we didn't have the technology in our homes. And many of the students didn't have it. And sometimes we didn't even realize as a teacher that they faced these problems. This disconnect between being able to learn or not was already mentioned by Alistair this morning. And I want to add an example here. So I give this year, I give this very short course, and each Friday, so it's a short course, and I give it, and it's with pleasure, and there's a lot of dynamic students involved. But at a certain point, after many months, I was talking to one particular student, and she told me the only quiet space she has at home is on the toilet. Now, up until then, I hadn't noticed, because she's good at, well, finding excuses not to be noticed. But just imagine that you have to work around this, that your only quiet space, and think about, we need to engage students. So we want to engage them. We want them to take part in group discussions. All of this is happening, but you need to do it from your toilet. And the whole family who is in lockdown also needs to cope with the fact that at certain points during your school day, you need to be there, and family can't go to the toilet. So I was quite surprised to hear this. And then I realized that although I tried to see what is happening in the personal learning space, I still don't know it, because of all the assumptions that as a teacher I have due to my own experiences. And these experiences make up a lot of miscommunications as well. Now, that old wooden bench you see, that's a type of bench that I had when I grew up and when I went to elementary school. So, and then you had the teacher in front, and the teacher told me what to do, and I did it. And if we were really lucky, there was a little bit of discussion that could happen, and it was in specific courses in my elementary school. And then we did it, and it was nice. But so I didn't expect anything else from a university professor than that they would stand in front of me and tell me what to do. That was the expectation. It wasn't much different than my own experience. But now we have elementary school children who already have this very diverse, very creative learning environment or learning space, and they gradually move through school, get to the university, and all of a sudden they come in lecture halls for some of their learning and teaching. And so imagine the expectation that they have, the expectation of using whichever computerized device, be it smartphone, be it tablet, be it laptop, be it desktop, anything, and to suddenly realize that you can't always expect this interaction to take place, because writing with pen and paper, that's your own note-taking. But if you push on a tablet, the tablet reacts to you. So you're used to this communication, this constant collaboration and enhancement and engagement with your environment, all of a sudden it stops in the university because of certain classical ways of teaching and learning. So it's no surprise that conflicts appear, and conflicts can appear during feedback sessions or even in the class itself. As a teacher, of course, you want to listen. If you are really a teacher at heart, a professor at the university, you really like to teach, you're going to listen to what your students say and you're going to enter in this conversation. But although this change is upon us, and although we've been telling people, teachers, please change the way you're teaching and your range, your teaching and learning, it doesn't really happen. And I feel very strongly that we need to address this. If the students and the learners and the professional world, because startups come with innovations, there are a lot of changes happening. If we can't listen to the experience of other people and can't learn from that, then we're obviously not in the right job and we should change jobs. But luckily, most of us are willing to take up this change, and we are living this change within us and in our respective learning spaces. We work in a different way. We work with startups as a university. We see that students who are in our university suddenly start their own organization, their own company, their own NGO, and they come up with innovations we never had before. The bottleneck of all of these, of the success of all of these learning spaces is not in the innovation, is not in the creativity that each one of us has, but it's with the people and how to optimize them and bring them to the best of themselves through these learning spaces. So that's why I still think that if you really look at what people are doing and the learning spaces we have, not that much has changed. It's still home, it's still work, it's still university and school. But it has been shaken. It's just not completely different than before. So thank you. This was what I had in mind. I hope it triggered some ideas.
Thank you very much, Inge. It was really interesting to see how you broadened this idea of learning space and gave many different examples what a learning space could be. There was one question from someone in the Padlet regarding the digital divide, and I think you talked a bit about this, but some of these or many virtual learning spaces are based on quite expensive technology. For example, we saw augmented reality here, and maybe might favor learners who can afford the latest devices and broadband connections. How can we make the virtual space less exclusive so it's inclusive for everyone?
Well, I had put a lot of thought in this. In a way, of course, let me start with saying my ideal world is Star Trek. So no more money and just motivation, and just if you want something to happen, make it happen with your colleagues and everything is fine. But in this day and age and in the earth that we live in today, we have to take into account money. And of course, this means there is a divide money-wise. And how can we help to diminish this divide? I think is by a closer collaboration with companies or with NGOs, for instance, because innovation is situated in companies, so they can maybe, if there is some way, give something back to the universities where they studied, and, for instance, deliver some of their innovations as like a testing tool to the university, or create a virtual lab. If Volvo says, look, this is what we have now as to build cars, and they are willing to pay a big chunk of this development, that's beneficial for the university and beneficial for students, because then they can see, okay, this is how they're doing it right now.